My sister-in-law, who had never been particularly kind to me, invited me to her housewarming party. As I sat down to eat, she loudly declared in front of everyone, "Wait for the leftovers, just like your low-class parents taught you," leaving me utterly humiliated. But the real shock came when Phil, finally fed up with her entitled behavior, made a decision that left her stunned. Now, she can kiss her new house goodbye. I'm a 34-year-old woman, and I've been married to my husband, James, 36, for 8 years. We've always led a modest life, prioritizing financial stability over lavish spending. James is an engineer, and I run a bakery. Through years of dedication and careful planning, we've built a comfortable life, not extravagant, but secure. We focus on what truly matters, strengthening our relationship, planning for the future, and being responsible with our resources. However, dealing with James's family has always been a challenge, particularly when it comes to his youngest sister, Rachel, now 32. To put it bluntly, Rachel is difficult. As the youngest and only daughter in the family, she's been spoiled her entire life and behaves as though the world revolves around her. I don't like speaking badly about others, but in this case, it's simply the truth. Rachel married her husband, Thomas, a 38-year-old investment banker from New York City, 3 years ago. Thomas comes from old money, and they previously lived in a high-end apartment in the city. Recently, however, Rachel set her sights on buying a home in an upscale neighborhood. Nothing less than her dream house would do. But despite Thomas's family wealth, his parents firmly believe in financial independence and refuse to contribute. So Rachel and Thomas turned to my father-in-law instead. Being unable to say no to Rachel, he agreed to cover the down payment, making their purchase possible. That decision set off a chain of events none of us could have anticipated. From the very beginning, Rachel made it clear she didn't like me, though I never understood why. Her animosity started with subtle jabs about my background. I was raised by hardworking immigrant parents who owned a small grocery store. Though we didn't have much, they instilled in me the value of education and perseverance. When they tragically passed away in a car accident 5 years ago, it was an immense loss. Yet, even then, Rachel didn't hold back her cruelty. Her snide remarks about my upbringing became even sharper, making it clear she saw me as beneath her. She would say things like, "No wonder James doesn't take you on fancy vacations. It's probably best not to give you a taste for luxury." Every time Rachel spoke, it felt like a deliberate attack, like she was taking aim at me and my parents, trying to chip away at my confidence. What made it worse was the way she seemed to enjoy it, as if her wealth and status somehow gave her the right to belittle me. At first, I tried to brush it off, telling myself that her remarks stemmed from her own insecurities, jealousy, or some other personal issue rather than anything to do with me. But over time, her relentless digs became exhausting. It wasn't just the things she said. It was how she constantly flaunted money and luxury, as if those were the only things that mattered. When she and Thomas first moved into their upscale apartment, she wouldn't stop bragging about their designer furniture, expensive artwork, or lavish European vacations. It was obvious that, to her, material wealth was the ultimate measure of worth, and she wanted me to feel like I didn't measure up. James has always been on my side, but dealing with Rachel has been draining for him, too. As her older brother, he feels responsible for her, but even he has grown frustrated with her entitlement. He's had countless conversations with her over the years, telling her that her words were hurtful and unnecessary, yet she refuses to change. In Rachel's mind, I'm beneath her, and nothing will convince her otherwise. Her attitude caused tension between us, but I never wanted to put James in a tough spot. I tried to handle things quietly, only speaking up when her behavior became unbearable. But everything finally came to a head at Rachel's housewarming party, which she hosted shortly after moving into her new home. Naturally, James and I were invited. I would have preferred to skip it, but James felt it was best to go for the sake of family harmony. Reluctantly, I agreed, hoping that now that Rachel had everything she ever wanted, a wealthy husband, a stunning house, and financial backing from our father-in-law, she might finally stop treating me like I didn't belong. The moment we arrived, it was clear Rachel was basking in the spotlight, soaking up compliments from her friends while parading them around her new home. She proudly led guests through each room, showing off extravagant features like custom marble countertops, state-of-the-art appliances, and a sprawling backyard with a luxury pool. I kept my distance, making small talk with other guests and doing my best to stay out of her way. But throughout the evening, I could feel her eyes on me. She was waiting for the perfect moment to strike, and I should have known she had something cruel planned. Dinner was served buffet style, so I filled my plate and took a seat at one of the long tables set up in the backyard. I was quietly eating when Rachel seized her chance. She strolled to the head of the table, wearing a smug expression, and then dropped her cruel remark for everyone to hear. "Oh, wait for the leftovers, just like your low-class parents taught you." The entire table went silent. A sharp pain hit my chest as her words sank in. I wasn't just humiliated. I was hurt on a deeper level because she had dragged my parents into it. They weren't there to defend themselves, which made her insult even more cutting. I sat there, frozen in shock, as Rachel glanced around, clearly expecting laughter or approval from her guests. But something completely unexpected happened. My father-in-law, who had been sitting quietly at the far end of the table, suddenly stood up. Now, he's always been a reserved man, one who avoids family drama and rarely takes sides in conflicts between his children. But this time, he had clearly reached his limit. With a stern expression, he looked directly at Rachel and told her that her behavior was unacceptable. He said he had tolerated her selfish attitude for years, but this crossed the line. If she didn't start treating people with respect, not just me, but everyone, she would find herself cut off, both financially and emotionally. Rachel was completely caught off guard. Her face flushed red as she tried to argue, but father-in-law wasn't interested in hearing excuses. He reminded her that he had helped her buy this house because he believed she was ready to handle the responsibility, but her actions had proven otherwise. He made it clear that unless she apologized to me and changed her behavior, she could forget about receiving another cent from him. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Rachel standing there in stunned silence. The atmosphere at the table grew unbearably awkward. Guests quickly found excuses to leave, and James and I followed soon after. I was still processing what had just happened. I never expected my father-in-law to defend me so openly, especially against Rachel, but I was deeply grateful. It was the first time anyone in James's family had publicly held her accountable for her actions. The days following the party were tense. Rachel was livid, not just at me, but at her father. The very next day, she stormed over to her parents' house, demanding an apology from him for embarrassing her in front of her friends. What truly infuriated her, though, was the fact that her wealthy social circle had now learned she hadn't actually paid for the house on her own. Until that moment, she had let them believe she and Thomas had funded it themselves. Now that the truth was out, she was mortified. But my father-in-law didn't budge. He stood firm, repeating that her behavior had been unacceptable and that his conditions remained unchanged. Unless she apologized and made an effort to change, she would receive no further support from him, financial or otherwise. And he wasn't bluffing. Up until then, he had been quietly covering part of Rachel and Thomas's monthly mortgage payments. Without that financial cushion, they were in serious trouble. Despite Thomas's family wealth, his parents had made it clear they wouldn't step in to bail Rachel out. Now, for the first time, Rachel and Thomas would have to manage on their own. Rachel did not handle this well. She blocked her parents on social media, ignored their calls, and distanced herself entirely from the family. The tension was palpable, but James and I did our best to stay out of it. We hadn't heard from Rachel directly, but I knew this wasn't the end. Rachel wasn't the type to let something like this go, and I was right. After cutting ties with her parents, Rachel turned her attention to me, bombarding my phone with text messages. She accused me of ruining her party and demanded that I apologize to her. In her mind, I was the one who had wronged her, not the other way around. It was completely absurd. She had publicly humiliated me by insulting my parents, yet somehow, she believed I owed her an apology. The sheer entitlement was mind-blowing. At one point, I was so overwhelmed by the constant drama that I actually considered apologizing just to make it all stop. But deep down, I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. I needed an outside perspective. So Reddit, I'm turning to you. Am I in the wrong here? I don't think I am, but this whole situation has been so exhausting that I could use some clarity. Update 1. Hey Reddit, I wanted to check back in with an update. Unfortunately, things have only escalated since my last post. You'd think Rachel would have taken some time to reflect after what happened at her housewarming party, but no, she has doubled down. And now, her husband, Thomas, has joined the fight. Rachel has continued her relentless texting campaign, blaming me for everything, from ruining her party to destroying her relationship with her father. According to her, I'm the reason the family has turned against her. At first, I tried to ignore her, but it's difficult when your phone won't stop buzzing with guilt-tripping messages and insults. I even thought about blocking her, but I didn't want to give her an excuse to paint me as the villain or make it seem like I was running away from the situation. Then Thomas got involved. He started calling James multiple times a day, pushing him to fix the situation. At first, his tone was calm. He framed it as a reasonable request, asking James to help mend things between Rachel and their father. But when James made it clear that he wasn't going to intervene, Thomas's approach shifted. He started dropping hints that helping them could be mutually beneficial, saying things like, "You know, if you help us smooth this over, we can make sure you're taken care of too." It was obvious what he was getting at: money. Thomas was trying to bribe James into siding with them, likely hoping James could convince their father to keep covering their mortgage. The whole thing was disgusting. It became painfully clear that Thomas and Rachel are two sides of the same coin, both entitled, both manipulative, both thinking they can solve everything by throwing money around or pressuring people into submission. To James's credit, he shut it down immediately. He told Thomas he wasn't interested in whatever benefits he was offering and that Rachel had made this mess herself. That didn't sit well with Thomas. The moment James stopped engaging, Thomas started getting more aggressive, calling repeatedly, leaving angry voicemails, and clearly growing more desperate. It's exhausting. James is trying to stay level-headed, but I can see the stress weighing on him. We just want to live our lives peacefully, but Rachel and Thomas refuse to let it go, dragging us deeper into their mess. As if things weren't chaotic enough, Rachel decided to take her drama straight to her parents' doorstep. Even though my father-in-law had made it crystal clear that he was done financially supporting her unless she apologized and changed her behavior, she still thought she could strong-arm them into giving in. She showed up unannounced, barged into their house, and immediately started shouting. From what James's mom later told him, Rachel was in full meltdown mode, screaming about how unfair everything was and insisting that she deserved their continued financial support. The entitlement was off the charts. Then, in a truly absurd twist, she actually threatened to sue them if they didn't keep paying for her house. I mean, seriously, who even thinks about suing their own parents over something like this? The irony? Father-in-law used to be a lawyer. Apparently, Rachel forgot that little detail when she tried to throw legal threats at him. He stayed completely calm and told her she didn't have a case. There was no written agreement obligating him to cover her mortgage, and even if there had been, his financial help was always conditional on Rachel acting respectfully and responsibly. Two things she had clearly failed to do. If she really wanted to take legal action, he told her to go right ahead, but it would only blow up in her face. Rachel, unsurprisingly, lost it. She screamed that her father was abandoning her and trying to ruin her life. She ranted about how if they didn't keep paying, she and Thomas would lose the house. The reality is, Rachel isn't just afraid of losing her home. She's terrified of losing the image she's built. She spent so much time flaunting her perfect life of wealth and privilege that she can't handle the idea of people seeing the truth. That without her parents' money, she and Thomas are in real financial trouble. Thomas's wealthy family isn't stepping in to save them, and neither of them seems capable of handling their finances like responsible adults. But father-in-law didn't budge. He told Rachel, once again, that until she took responsibility for her actions and apologized, she wasn't getting another dime. He was done enabling her tantrums and manipulation. Rachel, of course, stormed out, slamming the door on her way out. Since then, she's been on an absolute warpath. She's still blocking her parents on social media, but now she's going around telling everyone that her father is ruining her life. And, of course, that I'm the one who turned him against her. In her version of events, she's the innocent victim, and all the nasty things she's said and done have conveniently been erased from the story. James and I have been trying to stay out of it as much as possible, but it's hard when they keep dragging us back in. Rachel's messages have gotten even more vicious, and Thomas is still calling James every single day, trying to guilt him into siding with them. It honestly feels like we're caught in a never-ending storm. So yeah, that's where we're at. Rachel is still stirring up chaos, Thomas is still being manipulative, and James and I are just trying to hold on to our sanity. I have no idea how this is all going to end, but I hope Rachel eventually realizes she can't bully and manipulate her way out of everything. Until then, we're just taking it one day at a time. If anyone has advice on how to handle this mess, I'd love to hear it, because honestly, we're exhausted and running out of patience. Update 2. Hey everyone, I just wanted to come back with another update. First off, thank you all for your support and advice. It's meant a lot. Since my last post, things have taken an even wilder turn, and we recently learned something that completely changed the situation with Rachel and Thomas. I'll do my best to lay everything out clearly, but honestly, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it all. James and I decided it was finally time to visit his parents. We hadn't been over since Rachel's disastrous housewarming party, and while we'd kept in touch over the phone, we felt like a face-to-face conversation was long overdue. The tension in the family has made it difficult to talk like we used to, and we really missed them. Plus, we were curious to hear how things had been unfolding with Rachel, especially after she tried to strong-arm her parents into paying her mortgage. When we arrived, it was obvious that my in-laws were relieved to see us. My mother-in-law gave me the longest hug, and my father-in-law looked more exhausted than I'd ever seen him. It was heartbreaking to see just how much stress they were under. But after some small talk and catching up, they dropped a bombshell that left us completely stunned. Apparently, things between Rachel and Thomas have taken a serious downward spiral. We already knew they were struggling financially after James's father cut off the mortgage payments, but we had no idea just how bad it had gotten. My in-laws told us that Rachel and Thomas had been borrowing money left and right from friends, acquaintances, and even their wealthier neighbors. And we're not talking about small loans. Rachel had been leveraging her luxury lifestyle image to convince people that she and Thomas just needed temporary financial help until some big investment deals came through. The problem? Those big deals were total fabrications. Instead of using the money responsibly, Rachel and Thomas were burning through it to maintain appearances, funding their extravagant dinners, flashy events, and the lifestyle they wanted people to believe they could afford. But now, the truth is coming out, and people are realizing they've been deceived. Over the last few weeks, more and more of Rachel's friends have stepped forward, revealing that they're owed thousands of dollars. And it's not just a few people, it's a lot. One of Rachel's closest friends, someone she's known for years, finally confronted her about the debt, and instead of owning up to it, Rachel completely cut her off. This friend, desperate to get her money back, even reached out to James's parents, spilling everything. From what we gathered, Rachel has been dodging calls, avoiding messages, and pretending the problem doesn't exist. My in-laws were horrified, and I don't blame them. They didn't raise Rachel to act like this, but it seems like her entitlement has reached a point where she doesn't even care about the relationships she's burning. But as bad as Rachel's behavior has been, Thomas's situation is even more alarming. We found out that Thomas has been borrowing from his old social circles, people from his family's wealthy background. And these aren't just casual acquaintances lending him a few $100s. These are high-net-worth individuals who trusted him with huge sums of money, believing that, given his family's status, he would have no issue paying them back. But now, those lenders are running out of patience. They've started demanding repayment, and instead of handling things maturely, Thomas has been spiraling. One particular incident floored me. Apparently, one of Thomas's wealthy friends, who had lent him a substantial amount, tried to approach him at a social event to have a polite conversation about repayment. Instead of taking accountability or even offering an explanation, Thomas completely snapped. He started yelling at his friend in front of everyone, growing increasingly aggressive. Things escalated so badly that he ended up shoving the guy in the middle of the argument. The host of the event had to step in just to keep things from getting worse. This entire situation is quickly unraveling into something far worse than we ever imagined. And to be honest, I have no idea what's coming next. Update 2 continued. And here's where things get even more serious. The friend that Thomas lashed out at? He's not just some random wealthy guy, he's extremely well-connected, with ties to some of the most powerful families in the area. As a direct result of Thomas's aggressive outburst, this man has now filed a restraining order against him. But that's not all. Word is spreading fast, and if Thomas doesn't repay his debt soon, he could be staring down the barrel of a lawsuit. And not just from one person, several others in their social circle are also considering legal action if they don't get their money back soon. It's almost unbelievable how poorly Thomas has handled this entire situation. Instead of taking responsibility and trying to make things right, both he and Rachel have doubled down, insisting they're the real victims here. Thomas, in particular, seems to believe that his family's status makes him untouchable, but reality is proving otherwise. People are catching on to the lies, and the consequences are piling up fast. When James and I heard all of this, we were stunned. We knew Rachel and Thomas were drowning financially, but we never imagined things had reached this level of chaos. My in-laws are devastated. They never thought Rachel would put herself in this kind of situation, and now they're terrified that if this escalates any further, she could drag the entire family's reputation through the mud. And if that wasn't enough, Rachel still hasn't learned her lesson. She showed up at my in-laws' house again, this time in full meltdown mode, demanding that they step in and save her and Thomas from this disaster. She was screaming, accusing them of abandoning her and leaving her to deal with everything on her own. It's like she's completely detached from reality. She refuses to acknowledge that she brought this mess on herself. Once again, my father-in-law stood his ground. He told Rachel that until she took accountability for her actions, she wasn't getting another dime. But instead of taking a step back and reassessing, she exploded. She stormed out, swearing that she'd never forgive them for betraying her. It's absolutely heartbreaking to watch this unfold, especially for James. No matter what's happened, he still loves his sister. He's tried to reach out to her, hoping to talk some sense into her, but she won't even acknowledge him anymore. It's like she's cut off anyone who doesn't give her exactly what she wants and is doubling down on every bad decision she's made. Thomas is in just as deep, and with every passing day, it feels like they're spiraling further and further out of control. As for us, we're doing everything we can to stay out of the chaos, but it's nearly impossible when it feels like everything is about to implode. Between the restraining order, the potential lawsuits, and their worsening financial disaster, I have no idea how Rachel and Thomas are going to pull themselves out of this. My in-laws are heartbroken, and to be honest, I'm worried this is going to get even worse before it gets better. I'll keep you all updated as things unfold, but right now, we're just taking things one day at a time. This whole situation feels like it's spiraling out of control, and I honestly don't know where it's going to end. Thank you again for all the support. It's been a lifeline through this mess. Update 3. Hey, everyone. A lot has happened since my last update, and honestly, I can barely wrap my head around it. This entire situation has spiraled into something I never imagined possible. To those of you who've been following along and offering support, thank you. Your advice and encouragement have meant the world to me. So, remember when I mentioned that people were considering legal action against Rachel and Thomas? Well, it's no longer just a possibility. It's happening. Things escalated fast, and now they're both fully entangled in multiple lawsuits. It all started with Thomas's wealthy acquaintances, the ones he borrowed huge amounts of money from, only to ignore or lash out at when they asked for repayment. One of the most influential families in their circle was the first to take action, filing a lawsuit demanding immediate repayment, along with damages for how Thomas treated them. And once that case hit, it was like a domino effect. Others quickly followed, realizing they weren't the only ones he had scammed. Turns out, Thomas wasn't just borrowing money to cover their mortgage. He was using his connections to finance an entire lifestyle that was wildly beyond his means. And now, he's drowning in lawsuits, all from people who trusted him, thinking he was good for the money. And these aren't minor debts. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. But it doesn't stop with Thomas. Rachel's past is catching up to her just as quickly. Several of her former friends, people who once genuinely cared about her, have taken legal action against both her and Thomas. These are the same friends she manipulated, convincing them she was just in a temporary rough patch, while secretly maintaining the illusion of wealth. Now that they know the truth, they're furious. Not only did Rachel lie to them, but she also never had any intention of paying them back. The worst part? Instead of facing reality, Rachel immediately went into damage control, playing the victim, claiming she's the one being abandoned, that everyone's turned against her. But no one's buying it anymore. The deception, the entitlement, it's all caught up to them, and now they're buried in legal trouble with no easy way out. And yet, despite everything, Thomas still refuses to learn his lesson. You'd think that with lawsuits stacking up against him, he'd finally grasp the severity of the situation. But no, he's still trying to manipulate his way out. And here's the kicker. Thomas actually had the audacity to text my husband again. Unbelievable, right? He tried to bribe James, saying that if he could just convince his father to step in and bail them out, Thomas would make it worth his while. Can you believe that? Even with everything crumbling around him, he's still clinging to the idea that he can buy his way out of trouble with money he doesn't even have. James didn't even bother responding. At this point, it's almost comical how out of touch Thomas is. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I have a feeling this is only the beginning of their downfall. I'll update you all when I know more. Update 3 continued. And here's where things take an even stranger turn. While Thomas keeps digging himself deeper into this mess, Rachel, surprisingly, seems to be having a change of heart. Or at least, she wants me to believe she is. Over the past week, she's been texting me nonstop, sending one apology after another. The weird part? She's been using different numbers each time. Since she's blocked on my main phone, she's resorted to contacting me from random numbers, each message filled with remorse. She claims she finally realizes how wrong she was. She says she regrets the way she treated me, that she never should have insulted my parents, and that she understands now how much she hurt me. But honestly, I don't believe a word of it. After everything she's done, after the lies, the manipulation, the entitlement, it's hard to imagine that she's suddenly had a genuine epiphany. It feels less like an apology and more like a last-ditch effort now that she's run out of people to manipulate. My in-laws are torn. As much as they want to believe that Rachel is sincere, they're also wary. They love her, of course, but they've been burned too many times to ignore the pattern. At this point, they've accepted that there's only so much they can do. They've tried to help her. They've given her so many chances to turn things around, but she's thrown them all away. My father-in-law, in particular, has made peace with the situation. He told us plainly, this is karma. As painful as it is for him to watch his daughter self-destruct, he knows she's facing the consequences of her own choices. And for once, both he and my mother-in-law are standing firm. They will not be bailing her out this time. And honestly, that's exactly how it should be. Rachel needs to understand that she can't keep using people and expecting to get away with it. This isn't some temporary setback. This is the reality she created for herself. As for me and James, we're doing our best to stay as far away from the chaos as possible. It hasn't been easy, but we're focusing on our own lives and are beyond grateful that we didn't get dragged deeper into this disaster. And to everyone who told me to hold my ground and not let Rachel manipulate me into apologizing, thank you. Looking back, I'm so relieved I didn't cave. If I had, I would have only enabled her toxic behavior. Now, it's crystal clear. Rachel and Thomas are facing the fallout of their own decisions. It's painful to watch, sure, but it's not my responsibility to fix their mess.